Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Today we have the honor of speaking to Torry Mercer. Torry Mercer. I always get that name wrong, but anyhow. Um, Torry left a message after our show or during our show yesterday that really touched me, and it had a lot to do with the gun issues that we're all discussing. But beforehand, welcome to Politics and Right, Torry. How are you doing today?
Great. It's such an honor to be on your show. I've been listening to you for years, and I just think you're the best, especially back when KPFT used to have callers and people would call in that just didn't agree with you at all. And you were so gentle with them and, led them through the Socratic dialectic that just implied that we're all one thing. We're all together. We're all one people, as opposed to some of these other political uh, commentators that where they're just in a fight. They want to draw lines between people and separate people, and you want to bring people together, and
I
it's
mean
just
that.
very positive.
Thank you very much for that. But that's what I think my call. That's what I want my calling to be, and that is that we do that because people are my wife used to say people are people, and she's right. And we have more in common in just about everything than apart. And the powers that be, they need to keep us separated if they want to succeed in pilfering us all. But I have, first of all, tell us a little bit about your background, Tori, because I've listened to a lot of your poems. I've listened to some of your sort of rap stuff, and I really enjoy what you have to bring to the political discourse. So tell people what's your background.
Um, oh man, it's all over the place. Juvenile delinquent, social studies teacher, uh, dirt bike rider, motorcycle guy, bicycle guy. Um, Working with fairly radical nonprofits. Pueblo to People was my first career, a nonprofit organization that worked with to import things from indigenous people in Latin America for the most part. We started the fair trade coffee movement in the U.S. back when Ronald Reagan was president. We flew plane loads of Nicaragua Sandinista coffee into Canada, roasted it in Canada, and then sold it in the USA with a big FU to Ronald Reagan. So we broke the embargo, and it's just been one thing after another. After that, pirate radio. We did a pirate radio here in Houston for 18 months. 8 hours a day of fresh public affairs. I mean, it wasn't just a bunch of kids up there playing their old Who records. We were doing and that's why we got away with it. The FCC let us broadcast for 18 months because we were fulfilling the duty of radio
Hmm.
to inform people. We had all kind of folks that were, KPFT programmers that had gotten, kicked off, and they're doing public affairs. They weren't making a lot of money, but solid public affairs programmers, many of which are back on the air now. But It's every kind of solidarity campaign in Latin America when all the civil wars were going on down there. You're from Panama, you already know what I'm talking about.
Exactly right.
Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala. So we had solidarity campaigns here in Houston. So that's my perspective. Never quite fit in with the hardcore Marxist-Leninist kind of leftists. I was always more civil libertarian oriented and but still solid socialist. So not a lot of people over in my camp. So I've always had to work with other people. You know, uh, uh, Never found a lot of right ground with right wingers. Haven't worked with them too much. But all my friends in Houston are lefties, and then there's the artist side of a lot of punk rockers. Originally, the original punk rock scene was very attractive to me because there was a lot of political bands, and it just seemed like a continuation of the social activism kind of art that was going on in the 1960s.
Hmm.
Since then, punk rock has become just another cliche like everything else. So I'm always looking for a way to plug in, uh, and connect art and politics.
Well, I know you've been doing a good job, car show and all these other places that you participate in, and of course you're a historian, so you know a whole lot about history. But let me tell you why I really wanted to speak to you. Everybody has a position on the gun debate, but you know where I stand as far as bringing folks together, etc. I read the first part of your very long comment in our show yesterday. And before reading the entire thing, I called you up and I said, I want you on my show today to speak a little bit about that before I read the entire thing because I could see where it was going. And here's what you said. Countries with strong democracies have people that trust the government and feel safe. Americans left and right do not trust the government and do not feel safe. There is a direct correlation here with gun culture. How to fix America's gun problem? Let's break it down. Both sides in the gun debate do not feel safe. Both sides are afraid. And that's all I read. And by the way, it's about 20 times that length. But
Right.
that's all I read. And then I said, you've got to come on to Politics Done Right and tell us about this because I think people don't see the symmetry between what we call the crazy right wing and what we call the very left. They all have grievances, Torry, all have grievances, but there's something at the core there, and that is why isn't the government working for us all? So go ahead and take it away.
Well, I've been at this for a long time, and like I said, I like to use analysis. I took a CIA course at history of the CIA at U of H, Thomas O'Brien, and it's all about analysis. Whether no matter what you're doing in life, you got to figure things out. You're an engineer, right? It's all about
Hmm.
analysis. And so I find that increasingly that the whole left and right way of looking at the world just doesn't work anymore because the world's more complex than that. And this and as we become one world, it gets even more complex because there's so many different political systems and philosophies, and so it's I don't think in terms of left and right anymore. I think in terms of how are we going to all kind of get on the same page? We're
Hmm.
trying to get through this dialectic. We're trying to bring very disparate points of view together to be on the same page. And so it's a lot about listening. It's a lot about analyzing. There's what people say, and then there's the subtext. What does that mean in the analysis? As a poet, I like to put things into metaphors. And when I hear the right wingers, talk about gun rights, and I'm thinking at the cultural level, the mass
Hmm.
level, not at the NRA level, which is basically a lobby group for the gun industry. And we know what they want,
Hmm.
Lapierre. They just want some money, and they're going to get it. And that's not the gun culture. Okay, the gun culture is the entire country before it was a country, and guns were part of our safety. When there was these single shot muskets. There's wolves outside. And you got to go outside to go to the bathroom. You got to take your gun outside with you just to go to the bathroom. It's about feeling safe, and guns make us feel safe, and that's from the get go. And so when I see the right wingers, and we're what we call right wingers, and what we call gun nuts, and gun culture people. They're all about this. What is it? The Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. So we got to break that down. What is that about? It's not about hunting. It's about King George, and King George can represent both domestic and foreign enemies. He was the king from another place, but he was also, English, and all the colonists were English. He was a domestic problem before he was a foreign problem. And so, as a poet, I like to think of King George. He's not mentioned in the Constitution, but the Second Amendment's all about King George, and that just represents authoritarianism. It represents the antithesis of the ideal. Not that we've reached the ideal, but the ideal is a democratic horizontal society. And King George, represents authoritarianism, whether domestic, like Donald Trump, or whether foreign, like some, autocratic system that might be imposed from without. And so, and as a civil libertarian, hardcore socialist, left-wing civil libertarian, I, believe in vigilance. Also I'm a historian. And so, I know that there's a lot of precedents for authoritarianism to pop up, whether it's, the Red Scares, from the 20s and 30s, or, during the Civil Wars where I became enculturated and politicized, the Civil Wars in Latin America during, Reagan and, Bush point one. I remember when there was some solid opposition to particularly what was going on in El Salvador. And, this runs through the Carter administration. And there was rumors, that there were detention camps being set up at military bases in the U.S., 4 of them, to hold 10,000 people each, just in case, things really popped off and, there was mass, civil disobedience and rebellion against U.S. foreign policy. It never, got to that point, but it made a lot of people in the left back in the 1980s think that, hey, maybe we should, get some guns. I never bought a gun. I've never bought a gun in my life. But I know people that did, some other hardcore lefties buying automatic weapons and, riot control shotguns and crazy stuff that's illegal now. And one communist friend of mine bought a automatic shotgun and, blew a hole in a roof of his house. And eventually those are illegal now. He had to give it up. But, we need regulation on guns. I mean, there's any number of ways to fix.
I want to stop you right there, Torry, for one thing, because what you've just showed me there is that you've showed that during the times where many on the left feel a certain level of threat, that amazingly, their response wasn't all that different than some of these guys on the right, even though you and I know that their fear is really a false fear, but
Sure.
That reaction was there.
Yeah, I mean, it's like people need to trust their government. What's the difference between the USA and countries that have a lot of guns that, or, don't have a lot of guns, doesn't even matter, but, democracies that people were, think Nordic countries where people trust their government, things, it's not just, it doesn't start with the gun issue and it doesn't start with the gun culture. It starts with social safety net,
Right.
people feeling safe, that they're going to be able to get a place to live and food and education and medical care and care when they're old and care for their children, just a sense of safety. We don't have that in the USA.
And
People,
I want to interrupt for one reason because we give the right a hard time now justifiably, but the parts of the right that we seem to me we really should give a hard time is the leadership that is that's forcing that false narrative into those on the right to believe their culture is being usurped when we've always had a multicultural system, just that others are being empowered now, that somehow something is being taken away from them, that their birthright is being taken away from them, when many a times the converse is true. Isn't that right?
yeah, I mean, we're constantly battling the past.
Right.
And, that's sort of the essence of the conservative movement in the U.S. It starts with the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act in 1964. Like black people are going to vote. Oh my gosh. I mean, that, triggered the biggest shift in this country. All those, Klansmen from the 1930s and other folks that supported the New Deal and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I mean, they were the Democratic Party in the South. The
Right.
KKK ran the Southern Democratic Party, and it, here's our analysis. It made the New Deal possible. And
Right.
when a lot of those Klansmen didn't go away by the 1960s, when they were still Democrats, but they left the Democratic Party and went and became Republicans because their world was shifting into a new thing. They weren't used, and they just weren't ready for it,
Right.
and they weren't ready for the new world, and they wanted to conserve the old, stratified, social system where there's a subclass, people that were below the constitutionally protected legal system.
Yeah, I like the way that you brought in, and you remember I said I only read the first part, which is what I wanted to discuss, and then how you brought in Chile and all the things that happened with Pinochet and Allende. What I really want to talk about
Right.
now is what do you see as a solution with the gun issues, with gun regulations, etc. How do you see a solution that both the left and the right will accept?
Well, there's two fixes. One's very long term, and it's a cultural fix, and it has to do. And we don't even start with guns. You start with providing people everything they need to feel safe. The social safety net. From cradle to grave. And it's a little more difficult here in this incredibly class stratified society that's multicultural. It's a lot easier here than it is in Switzerland. Okay, I mean, it's just like that's a long term fix. Okay, the short term fix is to basically satisfy the needs, the deep needs, what we would call the subtext of both of these sides, the right wingers, we call them, or the gun nuts, and, the, progressives, or just, people that are afraid to send their kids out of their house because, they go to church or to school or to the mall and the kids are going to get shot, so how do we, deep listen to both of these sides and come up with some kind of legal solution as opposed to a cultural solution? And so, when I hear, the right wingers, because, I think that's who, people on the progressive left need to listen to the most because, we're too busy listening to ourselves and we understand what that problem is. We understand what our needs are. But in order to get to the solution and move this ball down the field, we need to, do some deep analysis of the right. And I'm not talking about, the gun lobby and these people that are just exploiting the chaos because there's no end to, people that will exploit chaos for profit. They're not going to go away. But the people that are really concerned, like these, kind of right-wing veterans that listen to Fox News, and they've been in the military, they've sworn an allegiance to the Constitution, and they might not be scholars. So I'm kind of interjecting a little bit here, but they're afraid of King George. To use a metaphor, they're afraid of, back in the 50s, it was, the communists are going to take over the government, and then now it's like, now Bernie Sanders is going to take over the government. Who knows? Their analysis isn't great, but they're basically, it comes back to a legal position of defending, using the Constitution, which has its good points and bad points, but using that Second Amendment to basically say, we need to be aware of authoritarianism. We need to be aware of overreach by, our government or any other government, and, what they're really afraid of is gun confiscations, doing something that's outside of their will and having a gun registry. Okay, so how do we, get to a safe place and satisfy the progressives on the left and satisfy everybody, the people on the right? How do we, get to a point where we have background checks and, safety ensured, that somebody knows how to use a gun, it's not mentally unstable? How do we do that without having a gun registry? And it's just not that complicated. This isn't rocket science. And it has to do with what I call a gun purchasing license. Okay, so it's like we have all kind of other licenses that people need to acquire whenever they want to do anything. It's all about a level of trust, right? Whether you're going to teach children or do brain surgery, you have this license, to do electricity, whatever. It says that you were allowed to go out and do this job. And because we trust you, that's a license. And that's the legal thing. Okay, we just need to separate that license that, says we trust you to use a gun. We need to separate that from the actual purchase of a gun. Okay, now people that sell guns have those licenses. I mean, people that have, gun stores, they have to get a license from the government that says, we trust you to sell these guns. And they have to, do their due diligence and, make sure they're not, doing illegal things with their guns, selling them to, overseas or whatnot. Um, and so just it's that simple. We separate the license to buy a gun from buying a gun. You get a license to drive a car doesn't it mean your car just is registered. You don't have to buy a car. You just need, you get a license to drive. The government says, we trust you to drive a car. And then imagine if when you went to buy a car, you had to show that license. And you can't buy a car without a license that shows, you can drive safely. But there's no connection between the purchase of the car and the license. You're not registered. And so that's how a gun purchasing license would work. It would basically just extend the license from a gun dealer to a gun owner, except there's no connection. By law, the gun sellers, would not be able to register you as the purchaser of the
So
gun.
if I understand your concept is, but you have to qualify for the license, which means that license would make sure that you're mentally competent, that you haven't beaten your wife, that you haven't done all of these things. And once you prove that you're a responsible citizen, you have a license to go out there and buy weapons. The part that you didn't cover in your article is what about weapons of war? Do you want to, we should prohibit the sale of those in your phase or what?
Yeah, I don't think that, you know, the ultimate concept is safety, so we want guns to make us feel safe, and, I mean, I don't want one, but that's why a lot of people want them. And so, to protect your house, from a burglar or whatever invading, you probably need a small pistol. If you maybe a shotgun. The problem with these, AR-15s, these high-powered weapons, isn't that they have, magazines that shoot 30 shots. The problem is the size of the bullet. I mean,
Right.
these things are huge. They
Yeah.
will go through 3 brick houses in your
Right.
neighborhood. So you're trying to stop the guy that's getting in your backyard. Sure, okay, let's say you shoot him and you stop him, and then it goes through,
It
you
goes
know,
through him and kills somebody else.
it goes through the wall of your house, and it goes through the wall of the 2 brick walls of the next house, and then it goes through the 2 brick walls of the next house. I mean, it's not the right tool for the job.
So
I
my
mean,
question
it's
to you
like,
then is, in as much as you're saying this part is easy, there's a small fringe that I don't think would like the idea that I think you're coming to a conclusion of, and that is we probably shouldn't allow the sales of weapons of war like the AR-15.
well, just like every other tool that you buy at Home Depot, we need our tools to be safe. We don't need them hurting people, and that don't need to be hurt. I mean, yeah, you might want to shoot the burglar or whoever rapist coming in your house, but you can do that with just a small weapon.
Right.
You don't need a weapon that will penetrate a tank.
I think if people learn how to bifurcate the discussion as you did, meaning you still allow abstraction of owning a gun to some extent, but at the same time, you have to say we won't allow you to own a bazooka or AR-15. I think that's a better sell once we get control away from the NRA. But we're coming up close on time right now, Torrys. So let me ask you to give me a quick 1 minute closing statement here.
Yeah, ultimately, it's not a legal fix; it's a cultural fix. We need people to feel safe. We don't want anybody to have guns, including the police or the military or the civilians. We want a peaceful world where there's a horizontal democracy, one person, one vote, not some stranglehold on power like which a republic is. We need to move beyond our constitution. We need a better constitution. We need to fix our culture. Everything is south of the culture. All kind of politics, economics, everything is a subset of culture. So that's the long-term goal, is to change the culture. And we're ahead of everybody else. I mean, it's easy enough to fix a culture in Sweden or Denmark where it's mostly monocultural. I mean, we're ahead of the curve. We're multicultural, and that's a good thing. There's a lot of advantages to that. But, there's, the issues. And so we have to fix those as we go along. And it's up to us because, we are the world's leading multicultural, place. And so we got to do it. And here we are doing it.
Torry Mercer, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right. And I tell you something, sir. There you go, buddy. There you go. That
That's my
last
group,
statement,
Extinction Rebellion. That's what I'm doing now.
I know that's what you are, brother. That last statement is present. Thank you so kindly, Torry.
Cheers, mate.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.